and gentlemen, stop everything.
It's time for another DJ Elf 7 candidate interview.
Yo, what's up? It's your boy DJ Elf 7. Today, got an extremely special guest. Now, as you know, I have candidates from all over the country participating in my UP24 interview series. And this is actually well, I'll let him introduce himself. Go ahead. Introduce yourself to my audience.
My name is Emanuel Pastreich, and I'm honored to be with you today. I was in the Green Party as one of two candidates for president, but I had been running as an independent for president since 2020, and I have been working very hard to try and articulate a clear and honest approach to governance and to the future of the United States and ultimately all the countries and the rest of the world which is connected to the United States at this particularly grim and worrisome time in our history.
Okay. Now, the thing is that, there's different qualifications that people may have for the office. I think you said that you did run in 2020. Now we're in 2024, so you have some electoral experience before. You may have some experience working on social issues, things like that, or legislation. What's your background as in terms of, that's relevant to this? I believe that you went to Yale. That's pretty impressive. What are some of the qualifications that you have to run for president?
Right. Well, of course, maybe I'll start out by saying how I'm not qualified to be president, and that is that I refuse to take any money from any corporations, from any rich people, and I spoke out very honestly from the very beginning in 2020 about the three truth issues. So one is the true nature of the 9/11 attacks. The second is the true nature of the Federal Reserve and where all the money went that was supposed to go to the Pentagon, was supposed to go to Israel, was supposed to go for quantitative easing, was supposed to go for COVID relief. And the third, of course, is about COVID-19 itself and this multifaceted bio, military, intelligence, media campaign. So these obviously disqualified me from the beginning, from February 2020 of being covered in the media in the United States or from raising money. And I ended up spending a lot of the time in Korea, and then this time, more recently, a lot of time in Japan. But I haven't given up the campaign. And I basically, my strategy, you might say, is not to try and raise money by holding my nose and taking dark money from various hidden sources, but rather to stick with integrity, with the truth, with the actual Constitution and law of the United States, and to say that, you might say, the election strategy is that I'm going to be the only one qualified to be president, that all the other candidates are so compromised that I can essentially, on election day say, if I have support, you should all step down. You're all guilty of multiple felony crimes by your active collaboration and participation in these multiple ongoing state crimes.
Okay, I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing this stuff up, and the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of gatekeeping that's going on. I know that besides taking the money, besides refusing to take money from rich people and corporations, I really appreciate. I know that you also faced interference within the Green Party. That's part of my work too. We're going to be exposing some of that. But really, this is just, a lot of people will not really be concerned about those things going on. We're just going to get to know yourself as a candidate. We'll be, after the interview's over, we're going to touch on some of those aspects which are very critical to the third party space, and I really appreciate your voice out on this. But this is just this candidate series I've run during the 22 election cycle. I had the most interviews with candidates in that cycle, and we're going to run these. These are standardized questions to really see how you stack up against other candidates. Okay, so so the thing is that we've learned about some of your qualifications. Now, people have different positions that they have, right? And I appreciate your positions once again, but we also got to see how effective they are, right? Yeah, what's their level of what are you most proud of achieving? That's right. Sometimes people say their kids, and that's a sweet answer. But I want an answer that's more relative to this particular position: management, right? Legislation. What is your relevant, right, accomplishments in this field?
Right. So I started as a professor at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I taught Japanese. I was trained in Japanese, Chinese, and Korean literature, and I taught mainly Japanese literature. But
And you
I
speak all
have
those languages too, right?
I speak all three languages,
That's pretty
probably Japanese
impressive.
twice.
It's pretty impressive. But go
What
ahead.
you Lee is that a what?
Yeah,
Can
one
I
of the
ask
very
you?
few. Yeah, there's supposedly like 7 or 8 like last names in Korea. Yeah, my last name is Lee. But once
Right.
again, just for foreign affairs, right? Yeah, it's cool when the president can actually speak those languages. Yeah.
Well, it's unprecedented, and in fact, it didn't come up. I mean, I think maybe intentionally in the Green Party discussion, but I tried in the Green Party to say I wanted to speak to Asian Americans in the Green Party, and they refused to introduce me to anybody. It was like they put the wall down, and I think it's partially because the Green Party has a certain bias, just in the same way like Democracy Now and these others, where they have a clear anti-Asian bias. They want to talk about the Middle East and talk about Central America, but they don't want to talk about anything in except for certain aspects of boogeyman China, which are given a sort of a leftist twist, but basically it's the same yellow peril content, and I find it deeply disturbing.
Yeah, there's a lot of over. They don't really look at our issues. Just so you know, Andrew
Please.
Yang's kind of blowing up in third party space, but every single Asian American captain in his New York City squad quit in disgust as he replaced
Right.
everybody with corporate campaign consultants. The press is
Right.
not covering this at all, right? Yeah. By the way, every single Asian American left his staff. He had an all white staff. I'm not against white
Interesting.
people, but the fact of the matter is
Yeah.
that if a prominent
No, I
black
understand.
leader had all white staff, someone would say something. But none, exactly like you point out, Democracy Now, I've emailed them, all these groups, they never reported anything. They don't give a damn.
Sure. So
Yeah.
I mean, Asian Americans only a part of the of the content, but it is I think it is significant that I went to Lowell High School in San Francisco, which is 75% Asian. So it's very I have a set and I that when I was at University of Illinois, that was a large part of what I worked on was saying Asia is important for the United States. We need people who speak Asian languages, understand Asia, not because we're saying Asia's great or good or bad or whatever. But just this is going to be the future of the United States. So that's one aspect. And then beyond that, I was working on education basically. So the question was what education would be going forward, and to some degree, international relations and security, which I wrote about starting from 2003. I was at the Arms Control Disarmament National Security program at University of Illinois, and so basically, what I wanted to do there was to say I had a friend who was in the military in the University of Illinois, and he asked, I said to him, well, we're wasting all this money in the military. And he said to me at one point, he said, well, what do you think? Do you think we shouldn't have any military, no force? And I said, no, I wouldn't go that far. And so he said to me, well, what is your proposal? What do you think we should be spending money on? And that's when I realized that all these progressives around me, I wouldn't say none, but basically didn't have a plan, like what they thought national security should be. And so I started writing about national security issues in terms of the environment, in terms of human security, etc., and trying to figure out, what would be a real national security policy, which is realistic, but doesn't just shovel money into investment banks via Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics.
Okay. So you talked about economy, you talked about military, you talked about
Mhm.
before earlier you were talking about Asian American before, and also before that even you were talking about confronting mainstream narratives that are often pushed by industrial, interests, right? Like
Sure.
the medical community, right? Yeah, pushing medicines or pushing, right? Yeah, other commercial solutions to our health instead
Right.
of, right? Yeah. So if people, right, Susan Busher-Lachaki, she's another president candidate I'm talking to right now. She's
Yes.
really talking about women's issues. If people want to understand you as a candidate, right, and I know there's probably more than one issue, but what are
Right.
some of the issues that really kind of, there's many issues that you already talked about already. I'm sure that you're very complex, right? It's hard to really pigeonhole someone, but what are the
Right.
main themes of your campaign?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously, I talked about the three truths before,
Sure.
but I think we have to talk about the nature of money, right? That basically we have this whole system set up in which basically multinational banks and corporations can make up money. And banks have essentially changed in their nature so that they're hostile to citizens. And the whole job of banks is to take money and assets away from you and to empower a very small number of people. So we have to basically take back money. I have a proposal for a revolutionary dollar to say we should start to build our own currency from the ground up, and basically take the not just money in the sense of how many dollars do you have, but the way in which value is given, the way money is printed up. Because right now, banks print up money out of nothing, and it creates inflation, which is essentially stealing your money. So this I want to confront directly. And some people like Ron Paul have sort of skirted around it, but nobody's really taken it on. And then beyond that, to say, well, for example, I don't say anything bad about YouTube, but Google and Facebook, all these things, Facebook or these other social medias, they belong to us. We're the users of it. And the only reason why these corporations make billions of dollars is because they have access to finance, which we don't have access to. But the content is all generated by the people. So Facebook or YouTube or Google or whatever, it belongs to you. It doesn't belong to these corporations. And so we want to make it clear to people that what ownership is. And this is also a very critical issue in terms of real estate and land, because right now, multinational banks are buying up real estate across the United States using fake money, essentially. They're designating to have all this money, which they got through COVID relief or other, even classified operations, because now the Treasury Department uses classified designations for internal documents, so you're no longer allowed to know what they're doing. And so they make up money out of nowhere. They use it to buy land. Suddenly, you have to rent because it belongs to Vanguard or Goldman Sachs or whoever, or other or Bank of America.
BlackRock, one of the largest real estate holders.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's going. I mean, of course, it's not just the United States. There are German, Japanese, Chinese, Russian players, and often, of course, they mask themselves. They form trusts in the Cayman Islands or wherever, and then they feed on you. But basically, ownership is under attack. And I don't mean, I'm not a defender of the super. Unfortunately, in America, ownership is the sort of libertarian, the twisted libertarian interpretation is to say, well, billionaires should be allowed to own everything and we should just be free for everyone. This, I think, is a distortion, because billionaires get to be billionaires by stealing your money, basically, by having access to finance, which is basically to the Federal Reserve based upon devaluing the money of citizens. But I do believe that some sort of ownership at the local level of you, your family, your community, to control your economy is absolutely essential to taking back the country.
Let me ask you a question about that right quick. The thing is that there's different people that have different political ideologies, right? You mentioned libertarianism. Greens are also usually associated with eco-socialism in a way, right? Yeah, they do have that history. Maybe you personally do or don't, or not sure. If there is do you have a political ideology or?
So I hate to disappoint people by not, adhering to any particular ideology. I personally think that traditional cultures, whether it's a Native American, for example, the Iroquois, the Great Law of the Iroquois Nation, for example, or for that matter, Confucian and Taoist ideas about governance, which I learned about before, or for that matter, other traditions in the West, offer us a whole sort of smorgasbord of potentials for what we can be. And for that matter, the Constitution has a lot of potential in it, which has been sort of totally destroyed by the creation of the security state, basically since 1943 or so. So I don't adhere, but I would say this, it doesn't, I'm not afraid, right? I'm not afraid to quote Rosa Luxemburg or Lenin when it's appropriate. And I'd say there's something to learn from George Washington, from Thomas Jefferson. I mean, Frederick Douglass, who was a big advocate, of course, in the abolition of slavery, he said in one of his speeches, he said, "I learned the most about freedom from Thomas Jefferson." And that was a very pointed point. I mean, he obviously knew that Thomas Jefferson was a big supporter of slavery, but he said we have to be able to distinguish between the corruption and this hypocrisy of Jefferson as an individual and the beautiful way in which he described the importance of liberty in his writings.
I have to say that, yeah, personally, I find this to be very reassuring. I find this to be a mature political take. Sometimes people, but that's just me personally, right? Not everybody's going to agree, and I'm not here to downplay anybody, but I appreciate that open type of, ideological stance where you're going to give everybody a chance and also understand that nobody's perfect, right? And stop deifying, right, certain people. So, personally, I appreciate it, but once again, it's for the viewers to decide where they want to take that, right?
Well,
now,
I welcome your comments and your questions.
Well, yeah, this first half of the interview is really just to get to understand who you are as a person. Then our second half will get more to the policy parts, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
So the thing is that now we know a little bit more about your political ideas, which personally I appreciate. What about sometimes people are influenced by certain political leaders, right? So I was raised in America, right? So who do I know about? I know about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, right? And you'll see that a lot in my materials. But you have more of an international, which is cool. Who have been some of the influences for your own political thought?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously people like Martin Luther King have influenced me. I mean, Frederick Douglass, who I mentioned before, in some ways was even more influential on me because I found some of his writings to be some of the most insightful. And of course, Martin Luther King bases a lot on Frederick Douglass's writings. I mean, people don't really know that because they haven't read through all the earlier speeches. And of course, in Korea, I mean, King Sejong and his idea of a sort of a creating a transparent and accountable society and governance, and the idea, of course, in Chosun period, of making accurate records so that people would know what was done and by whom, and really unprecedented effort to document what actually. There's a famous story. One of the kings of Korea. He fell off of his horse while he was out hunting, and he said to the scribe, he said, "Don't write that down in the records, right?" And then when the records of his reign were released 150 years later, the records said the king fell off his horse like an idiot. He told the scribe not to write it down, or something like that. So the historical record of what actually happened was a higher priority than kissing the ass of the king. And that, I think, the United States is exactly what we need today, because right now there's no accountability. There's no correspondence between what's being projected to you and what's actually happening in the United States.
Appreciate that, yeah. Okay, so now the thing is that we're going to get to some questions about your policy. Okay, and the thing is that I have my own questions, but the thing is I like to put my partners first, and this is a tradition on this show, so usually the first question I ask, which has been asked with over 60, 70 candidates so far, right? Yeah. Do you support the freedom of Assange?
For Assange, I mean, there's no question about that, and it's of course come up recently because the other is I'm blanking out. It's Schulte. There's another person who was put in jail. I was just writing about.
I saw that as well. Another political prisoner. Right, yeah.
Who is put in anyway. So Assange is obviously and many others. I mean, there are many people. Many citizens not aware of this, but there are hundreds, thousands of people who have been silently punished over the last 20 years. So Assange is one of the people. So sometimes I felt it's a little unfair to just focus on Assange over all the other people, and of course. I personally was a little disappointed, not to say I'm opposed, a little disappointed that Assange didn't go further on pushing on the three truths, which I mentioned. But I understand he has to make difficult choices, and clearly it's a horrible miscarriage, and it's being used to set, with the other one, whose name I can't remember, to set a precedent to say that the government can do whatever it wants to anybody, and that's extremely dangerous.
There was Snowden as well, but I believe that you, let me see if I can check that. You actually sent me a link to that other one, and I actually have that on the record here.
I'm sorry, I was not properly
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. There's a lot of
I
names.
give all these speeches. It says Joshua Schulte. Joshua Schulte is his name.
Josh Shelton,
And
yeah.
so he was a computer programmer who did some contract work for intelligence, and they tried to blame him for all these, I guess it was Vault 7 of WikiLeaks, which is probably he had only a little bit to do with. But since they couldn't catch the other people, they wanted to destroy him.
It's quite unfortunate, right? Yeah. By the way, just a warning to my viewers in the audience right now, the Assange movement is highly infiltrated. A lot of people, I want to shout out Dak Low, right? Yeah, who have made progress on these issues, or once again, this channel right here that you're watching right now has actually asked more candidates running for office about the Assange issue than any other channel. But we are highly blackballed within the Assange community. You guys need to understand that there's a lot of fishy stuff going on, and just check for yourself. It's been
there's
documented.
a standard technology, which is to take a case which is real and significant, but to just plaster it everywhere as a way of blocking out information about other equally critical points.
You're right, yeah, and to control the movement, exactly. To create a figurehead, right, yeah, to distract from the overall struggle and to capture the resources and the attention. That's exactly what's going on, I'm sorry to say. It is what it is. Hey, let's move on to another topic, right? I have some association with Yang Gang. Shout out to a separate issue called Brian from American Union. I know he's pushing UBI. What's your take, right? Yeah, do you support? Are you against, right? Maybe you want to learn more. What's your position on UBI?
So basic income is an extremely dangerous move.
Okay.
It is, in theory, good, but in this particular political environment in which we have really no democratic process and policies are made by multinational corporations and billionaires behind them, it's extremely dangerous because it's most likely to be spun in a direction to basically put a limit on where your money comes from and then give it to you probably in some digital form that can be shut off at any time and gives the government the right to say, how much you make or how much you're punished. And finally, the most fundamental problem with basic income is it assumes that you or me, don't make that much money because we do what we believe in, that the government can say, well, you're entitled to $35,000 a year. But, Bill Gates is entitled to $50 billion a year. Like, who says? I mean, if you're going to have universal basic income, then it should apply across the board. You shouldn't have people who have access to, made up assets from investment banks making hundreds of millions of dollars a year. If my income is limited to 30,000, it has to be equitable in its nature. So I think there's a real danger that if you implement basic income without addressing the issue of class in the United States, that it will be the first step to some sort of a class society or even a slave society in which you are branded as entitled to an income, i.e. a glass ceiling.
And just so you know, I know there's people out there who support UBI or against UBI. I think this is once again, I do appreciate this answer. I think it's a mature response. A lot of things that they say are for us become weaponized against us, from welfare to public housing, things like that. I am aware of this. And I actually really, for my UBI proponents, I'm often telling them about how dangerous UBI can be. And it's very essential. Right? A lot of people have this idea of supporting a slogan, or they say it's good, so we're just going to blindly support it. And it's extremely dangerous for people that have political experience. So I really appreciate that answer. Thank you so much. Let's go on to, now I know that this is actually slightly controversial in some of the circles we're running right now. But I am a trans supporter, just so you know. So the thing is that we know that when we go to the, we know that trans people often face discrimination in housing, and then jobs. So they often find themselves needing, like for example, public housing because they are poverty and they're destitute. Now the thing is that whether you agree with them or not, right? Yeah. The thing is that I'm gonna give you a hypothetical scenario, right? Yeah. Okay. So what happens is the trans people, let's say 10% of the people applying, just made up numbers, applying for public housing are trans. Now, we do a study later on and we see, 2% of the people in public housing are trans. So we see this discrepancy. We start talking to trans people. They say, "Oh, we're getting discriminated against. They're beating us up, right? Stuff like that." So even though, right, whether you agree with trans people or not, whether that, you know what I mean, how will you assure these people fair access to government, right, like to public housing, right? And
Right.
this also brings in the idea of quotas are as a potential solution. Maybe you reject quotas. How are you gonna, right? Yeah, we have some data that shows something's off. What are you gonna do about it?
Right, right. Well, so this is a question that I'm not as well prepared to
That's
answer,
okay.
but
Yeah.
I'll do my best, and I'd be happy to come back to it in a maybe when better prepared. So the issue of gender, trans, I mean, there's a whole discussion going on in the United States, and in some ways, to be honest with you, I prefer to address things in terms of class issues than in terms of gender and race issues. But I don't discount the fact that there is real racism and there is real discrimination upon people because of the lives that they choose or the identities that they choose. So, I mean, in that respect, I think everyone should be free to do as they see fit. Moreover, the whole transgender and for that matter, racial issues have been turned into weapons as well, which are being used systematically. I mean, I think we basically have a whole departments of Homeland Security who are assigned to weaponize and misuse or abuse issues of race and of gender in order to divide us up and create conflicts and to feed this sort of left-right sort of made-up fights. So I find that very, very disturbing, very dangerous, and I think we need to both say there's a real issue in terms of intolerance for people who choose alternative lifestyles. I prefer to say that because I'm not an expert on, sexuality. I don't even
I
pretend
get
to
that.
be.
But my trans allies who are watching, right, they're wondering, right, like,
Please,
how is
well,
this
ask
guy
me
going to
the
help me
question.
get fair access to the housing? Right, you're getting to it. I know, but okay.
How am I going to help you get fair access to housing? Right, right. Well, it's a
I don't. It's
I,
you
I
can
guess
see
I guess
actually
the
over
question would
that,
be,
right, and I like the fact that
uh,
you could admit that it needs some work, but you can actually watch over like 60, 70 candidates respond to this exact question and pick and choose the best ones, and also have we're also setting up communications with other parts of the
right,
country, such as the first trans mayoral candidate to run in Memphis, Tennessee. She's also an actress who was shouted out by Justin Pearson, who's worked on public housing issues, and you
right,
can
right.
actually exchange different ideas. So that's what's cool about working with this network right here. You don't
I think
have to
that's
be all the solutions, right? Yeah, you can start to have
I think
conversations.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So maybe the better statement for me to say is that we want to have a democratic republic in the United States. So that maybe the best way to be is to set up some groups who will discuss what the best way to approach this is, and include some people along the way who may have a different perspective on issues of gender and trans issues, but not to pick the ideologues fed to you by the Republicans or other.
And just to clear up one thing, it sounds like to you quotas are not really a solution.
Quotas.
Yeah.
So quotas is something which I am. I'm very careful about quotas because just like basic income, they can be misused.
Just so you know, almost nobody supports quotas. Out of all the groups, right, out of all the candidates I've asked, I'd say
So, I mean,
less than
my
5%
distinction,
even would support quotas.
right,
So,
right.
yeah, that's
So
a good
if
answer.
I
Yeah.
was to support
Skeptical,
quotas,
yeah.
I would want to say that we should support based upon assets. I mean, not even income, because I think income is a big mistake. I mean, the United States,
You're right.
we tax income.
Yeah.
We should tax assets, and that would change everything. So I would say that affirmative action is important, but that we have had. I mean, as you know, Martin Luther King, and at the end of his movement, one of the reasons why he was assassinated was he started to move into class issues. Right?
Yeah.
He started to say, workers are the issue, the poor are the issue. And one of my speeches, as you may have seen, is addressed specifically to poor Americans as the audience. And that's what I want to distinguish myself as a candidate, to say I'm more interested in talking to poor people, people who have been marginalized, than I am to wealthy donors. I mean,
appreciate that.
don't give a
Yeah.
shit about these wealthy donors. In fact, I'd
yeah.
like to put a lot of them in jail.
Good. Let's actually address another one of these uh, eh, communities that I work with, the disabled community. Now, the thing is
Please.
that right now, people with disabilities, if we look at
Right.
minimum wage, it's kind of like a subsistence wage. People look at, like,
Right.
the general, like, what the means of living are. And people
Right.
who are actually disabled are allowed to be paid sub minimum wage. Now,
Right,
maybe
right.
I understand there may be productivity concerns, things like that. Maybe it could be made up with federal subsidies, maybe not, right? Yeah, there's different ways that it could be paid for. But would you support at least minimum wage somehow for people who are who are disabled, so they can actually at least maintain a minimal standard of living?
Well, so at a basic level, obviously, yes. And I'm very sympathetic. I mean, I myself, I had brain surgery. I suffered from various different neurological issues in the past. I know what that can be. My wife is disabled, and not seriously, but it's enough that it affects her work. So I'm sympathetic with that situation, that position, and it's important. I guess the issues, of course, are going to be, where's, you know, the problem we're running into now is that people say, well, there's no money for it, or we're broke, or whatever, because we're spending all this money on weapons, or because billionaires don't pay any taxes, et cetera, or they've stolen $40 trillion from us over the last 20 years. So my answer to that would be, let's increase it exponentially, but let's not pay for it out of tax dollars from you and me, because that's a lot of times what we come up with, these solutions from these, especially from Democrats, is we're going to pay for it with taxes, right? And what that means essentially is either massive deficit spending, which results in inflation, which limits how much money you have, or more taxes on you, so you're paying for the benefits you get. The way it should be is to say all these multinational corporations, billionaires, banks, they got away with murder. They killed all these people in these criminal activities, and whether it's Pfizer or I can name a whole bunch of these companies, seize their assets. Take it all. You can get 20-30 trillion dollars by seizing the assets of the people engaged in illegal activities over the last 20 years. And I could detail to you what the illegal activities they did in terms of finance and in terms of the three truths, basically. But it's more than enough. If you or I did it, we would have all our assets seized. We would be in jail in a week. So I would say, what's fair for us is fair for them. And that would give us more than enough assets to cover disability and other people to get a normal lifestyle.
Okay. We only have about like half an hour left because I do have to get out of here, but I do want to make sure that we cover all these other issues. We're almost done with my partners, then I have my own issues to talk about, and also some of your general platforms. So just going to try to wrap up some of these answers. Yeah, I know we want to give a lot of explanations, but these partner questions are usually just yes or no is good enough, right? Most people know about the situation. If they don't, we could always have a long conversation about that. Let's talk about right now the another community that I work with, the right to repair. Have you heard of right to repair?
Right to repair.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know the term. Please.
Okay, so now the thing is that as you may know, people a lot of times they have like iPhones, things like that, and then if something
Right.
goes wrong with their phone, instead of
Right.
being able to repair their phone, the company usually recommends that the person buys a whole new phone. They will charge so
Right,
much for
right.
parts, right?
Right.
And this
Right.
is actually extending towards software as well. You're no longer allowed to own software. Now they rent it to you, and everything
Correct.
is on subscription model. And you no
Right.
longer really get to own anything. But right to repair also prevents people from modifying, right? Like vehicles,
Right.
you're allowed to
Right.
modify your vehicle or go to an independent repair shop.
Right. So the
So
Harley Davidson style approach
yeah,
is gone.
yeah.
Right.
And this has actually led to I don't know if John Deere has actually predated on the tractor industry, so farmers are really they're forced into contracts. Even Joe Biden had to fight against contractors and legalize right to repair for the military, because all the contracts for the military were forcing the military to pay them exorbitant money for repairs, and even
Right,
Joe
right,
Biden got
right.
fed up with it and said it's not right for the military. But now consumers are being forced into this.
Right.
Maybe it's time to learn more. But I think it's a topic that's affecting
Oh,
the large
excellent
conversation.
excellent topic, and it's of course related, I think, to the right to grow your own food, which
Yeah.
is also, the GMO and the agribusiness, which is trying to take over your ability to produce, and forcing you, essentially, your phones or your tools, your furniture, should be repaired by local people near you, because that would keep the money in your neighborhood and would generate jobs. And so, by it's linked to several different things. One is the conspiracy of multinational banks to take over distribution, logistics, and retail in the United States, and consolidate it basically under about 6 or 7 companies, which are basically owned by the same people. So it's a total monopoly. And then it's also linked to the free trade ideology, which is to say somehow it's benefiting us to have everything manufactured overseas so that they control it. And of course, they take their 10% or 20%. So it actually isn't that much cheaper, because they're forcing you to buy things you don't want, or for that matter, forcing you to throw things away which you could repair.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
it sounds like
skate-
overall you support right
Oh,
to repair.
absolutely.
Okay, cool.
But I'd be even more radical, I would say, in terms of basically the technology that these companies use to make these products is based upon government-funded research,
Okay.
and that they.
So now that I have
it
your
belongs
answer on
to you.
right to repair and your support for that, and I'm going to cut to some of the larger issues. So
Please.
let's take a look at it sounds like you have like quite an international background. So what's your policy on international trade, right? We talked about TPP, NAFTA, right? Free
Right.
trade. What's your position on international trade, or I mean, obviously you're against militarism, right? But what is
Right.
your idea on international
Well,
relations? Go ahead.
I'm not a big trade fan. I mean, I think trade can be very helpful in a limited sense, but most of our societies in the world, for the last, up until the last 70, 80 years, did not engage in these massive, shipping pineapples from Thailand to Malaysia to China and then back here, and I mean, all this plastic and all the waste destroys the environment. Incredible amount of exploitation which takes place. So I personally think that we really need to go back to production within communities. So that's one of the reasons why you're not going to see me on TV that much in the United States, is that I fundamentally believe that, in the case of China and US especially, China should be producing more stuff, food and products in China for Chinese, and Americans should be producing more in the United States. Not because we're enemies of China or whatever, but because this is the most logical, rational way to run your economy. Now, there are specialized products which should be shipped by trade, and that I totally support. But my guess is that's maybe 1/10 of what we're actually doing now. Now it's just insane, this sort of roundabout of parts and supply chain, and it's also linked, of course, to this drive to get us addicted to technology, that we're dependent on the latest semiconductor, latest chip being developed.
I agree with that. Yeah. Let's talk about right now. Another hot topic right now is the migrant issue. What's your take
Right.
on this border issue, migrants? Right.
Right. Well, so it's extremely. I mean, right now, I'm very hesitant to say what's going on, because there's so much fake news going on, and there's so much that's being set up to sort of create an incident sometimes out of things that are not really there. However, there is a real issue of migration, and it's driven by two main forces, I would say. One is the way in which multinational corporations, which, by the way, may have American names, but usually the corporation itself is not in the United States and doesn't pay much taxes, are exploiting land, farms, and local manufacturing around the world, and basically dispossessing an enormous number of people. And they try and go to countries where they can go to live better, which you would do too if you were screwed like that. At the same time, there are also multinational corporations, maybe the same people, who think that by bringing in large numbers of migrants into the United States, they can push down labor costs and destroy local communities and make us, essentially slaves. And they're intentionally doing that. So both of these things are happening at the same time, and it's basically rich versus poor class warfare.
I appreciate
Unfortunately,
that. Yeah. Go ahead.
unfortunately, we're given false choices on the Democrat and the Republican side. The Republicans, they identify accurately what's happening, how immigration is being used as a weapon, but they're being silent about who's actually doing it. Because they're getting all the money from multinational corporations.
Okay.
And the Democrats are like, we feel sorry for these immigrants, but they're playing the same game and taking the same money.
Another hot topic right now is education, right? From DEI to people arguing about the curriculum. What's your idea as president, right, for education?
Right. Well, education is extremely important issue, and one of my planks is extensively on the issue of education. Education has been destroyed in the United States. The United States in the 1850s, 1860s was the leader in the world in public education, and now it's really at the back of at the very back, and it's a systematic effort to dumb down the American people, and it's being done behind our back. So basically, a small number of people are trying to dumb us down for control, and they're hiding this between these fights about sort of ideology, some of which are real. I wouldn't say none of that's real, but it's a sort of mirror. It was a mirror. They're using cloaks and mirror. What's the word in English? I'm trying to think. To mislead you. So education.
Propaganda?
Well, yeah. But education I was a teacher, a professor, and I watched how education was gutted, how we lost all our funding, and how it became a low priority. So the way to fix education is first and foremost to say that the highest priority for the United States is the citizens of the United States, right? And that, so I would say the first step is not to say, oh, I have this policy in education, is to say that our colleagues in the Congress, that we're not going to have lobbyists.
Okay, so let's take it from a more of a, legislative hill like fight, right? Yeah. So where do you stand on private schools or homeschooling versus, right? Yeah, public education.
Public schools.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is going to be. So I would say that I'm not, I'm not a messiah figure, not one of those cardboard messiahs. So I would say let's have an open, rational debate on this question. Both sides have some legitimacy to them. On the one hand, the citizens that come together at the local level, form their own schools that they have control over. This is democratic, and in fact, that's in some ways how it should be, because you care about your kids in your neighborhood. On the other hand, there are people who've been so marginalized in our society that if you don't have some sort of central controlled public education, they will never get any education. They won't get the basics. And so there is, and there are standard things which people, I think, are entitled to learn. The sad thing is that much of the real, sort of meat of what education should be has been cut out of education. So it's no longer education at all.
I agree with you 100%. But that's just, once again, it's not about me, it's about you. So I appreciate your answers deeply, though.
I welcome everybody's, doubts and questions. It should be a dialogue.
Well, my audience knows if I got a question with you, I'm not saying I agree with everything, but if I got a question with you, we going at it, yeah? But I like your answers. They're very mature.
I get things wrong all the time. I welcome your criticisms and suggestions.
So this is the last question that I have, really, as in terms of this. Then we're gonna get to more of the specialization stuff going on in the Green Party. But as in terms of when we take a look at the federal spending, we've talked about military reform, things like that. One of the biggest expenditures, though, is going to be like Social Security, right, and other entitlements, right? Yeah, welfare, things like that. That's always a big discussion as terms of president's candidate. What's your position on? Right, we talked about UBI, so they gave me a hint about where you might go with that. What's your general take on the entitlements?
Entitlements, I think
welfare, Social Security, that type of thing.
We have to rethink
broad.
the whole thing. So I do think that we have to rethink the whole entitlements structure. So first, not everything can be solved with money, doing everything in terms of money is a mistake. So we have to live healthier. We have to provide healthy food to people. We have to educate people about what health is, how to take care of themselves. Because, as you know, a lot of hospitals, doctors are murderers now. They're killing people. They're giving wrong, medications, wrong surgery, and I don't have to tell you about various injections and things.
The
So,
opioid crisis. This is a known fact. For some reason, we still trust this industry. It's just dumb.
there's
right.
good reason for some people who call themselves conservatives. I'm really not interested in conservative liberal dialogue to say that we should be distrustful of these systems that have been set up because they do favor certain groups. And on the other hand, we're in a transition. We haven't set up this society in which we control our own money, in which we can, focus on citizens as opposed to multinational corporations. So there's going to have to be some sort of transition period in which we're going to sort of move the money which is being spent, to subsidize Israel and the Ukraine being used for useless missile defense or other, F-35s which can't fly and things like that, and have to put it into supporting our citizens in terms of basic benefits so they can live a decent life.
Okay.
However, in the long term, I think we have to think that we have to be more independent, more healthy, more self-sufficient, and not be dependent on big governments which can be taken over.
Yeah, we may be having a long discussion on some of these topics as time goes on, as we have more communication with different candidates all around the country as part of the UP24 series. I do actually have to get to an appointment with my man Mark, but I do have questions about actually right now. I saved some time for this to talk about your particular experiences in the Green Party. Now, I'm the former New York State coordinator of the People's Party, and a lot of things that are going. Honestly, I want to tell my audience right now that the third party independent candidate space right now, people know that the American people are dissatisfied with the duopoly, but unfortunately, the third party independent space is under attack like never before. And actually, my man right here can testify about some of the things going on in the Green Party. He's not the only one. We've had Alaska come in. We've had Maine come in. Notice that once again, not only is the regular media not talking about this, but also the independent media is also squashing all information about this.
So-called
independent media. So, once again, this is very exclusive testimony because none of the other channels will cover it so far. What's going on in the Green Party, man? What's up?
Right. So I had run as an independent, and I had given a series of talks between 2020 and 2023, which got an audience because I addressed real issues and I was not trying to fake people out.
But wait, how long have you been a Green then?
So I was a Green originally from 1997 until 2003, and then I left. And then I had nothing to do with the Green Party at all because I was really sort of disgusted by some of the things that they did under the Bush administration, i.e. not calling out state crimes. And so I had nothing to do with them. And then
where were you in the Greens? Were you like were you overseas in Green National? Which one?
Champaign, Illinois.
Okay, so you were in the Green Party, Illinois. Interesting. Okay.
Correct. Yes. So and we had good groups, and I attended regularly meetings. But I was anyway. So in 2023,
have you ever heard Toneel Jackson, by the way?
Have I what?
Toneel Jackson. I think she ran for water commissioner or something in Illinois.
Yeah, well, it might have been after I left.
Might have been. Yeah.
I left
Interesting.
2004. But anyway, so and of course I wasn't in Chicago. I was in Champaign. So what happened was a group within the Green Party, which is what we call now Green Liberty and Green Renaissance, two caucuses, asked me if I would run, a couple individuals, because I think they wanted Cynthia McKinney, who had run before and was very much on the truth side, but for various reasons she was unable to do it, and I was, of course, I didn't want to do it either because I was disappointed with the Green Party, but I was convinced over time that this group, the Green Liberty Caucus, was serious. And so I went through the whole process, registered, set everything up, and then I was, Cornel West and I were the only two candidates for president in the Green Party for basically the month of September.
The thing is that you would have thought that you would get covered, right? Yeah, because when Cornel West dropped, you'd want to find out about his competitor or something.
Right.
But the press did not cover you at all. It's just they asked no questions. Cornel West leaving, right? We're not going to ask any questions about what happened to People's Party. We're not going to ask, was he scared of his competitor? Was he scared to answer questions? No, he just left because he didn't want to have a messy time with the party. Well, what's the mess? I want to know. So go ahead.
Yes.
What happened? Why are they so scared of you, man? I mean, is it that? What's going on? Yeah.
Well, so I mean, Cornel West. I mean, I've never met him. I've corresponded by email with him. I don't know.
Oh, you
10
have?
years ago.
Okay.
I have.
He responds to your emails.
Well, he responded. I can't even.
Oh, well, interesting. Okay.
So I mean, I have no beef with Cornel West. I wasn't an enemy or anything. We didn't really. We both have affiliation with Harvard originally.
Really? Okay.
I mean, I went to graduate school there, and of course, I was of course applied for a job there. I never taught there.
Which graduate program? Was it Chinese
I
or was it?
program. I was in Asian studies. I did Chinese, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean literature. So that was
interesting. Okay.
Anyway, so I had no personal beef, but the issue was this: the other people in the Green Party were very critical of Cornel West. I thought, as a candidate, it was not my job to criticize Cornel West, and in fact, I did end up criticizing him, but only at the very end. I didn't really want to. The problem was that the word went down from the Green Party that I was to be totally ignored. And so I didn't appear anywhere. No media ever covered me, even though there were only 2 candidates.
Hell yeah, I'm fighting against them too, man. I'm with you 100%.
So, yeah. So I mean, normally if you had 2 candidates, only 2 candidates in the Green Party, and I was not a, not a clown.
Jill Stein was part of Cornel West's campaign manager. Was she involved in gatekeeping you and making sure that?
Oh, so I wonder. Of course, I don't know, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility that Jill Stein and Cornel West get directives from Homeland Security about what they're supposed to do and not to do. So
I have that feeling. Just so you know, Susan Busher-Lachaki, yourself as a presidential candidate, right? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Do you have? Are you in communication with Cynthia McKinney?
Yes.
Oh,
well, not
great.
recently, but we have spoken and we've corresponded.
Well, let's get to. We have other significant Greens come through. Matt Ho's been on my channel. Unfortunately, he's with the Jill Stein crowd, but that's all been documented. He's also been on the channel, right? Yeah.
Right.
We're gonna bring them. We're gonna bring them all on, and we're gonna see if they show up. Yeah, you can keep running, but
I welcome.
We're documenting the facts right here. Yeah.
So in Green Party, we offered to Cornel West and others to have debates, and the Green Party nixed it. There were going to be no debates because we don't exist.
They're scared. I'm sorry, they're scared. That's what I think it is. Yeah. Thank you for your testimony.
I also think that that in the case of Cornel West, that there are signs that he was getting scared, because this is not a minor thing. I mean, the United States is in a rather bad situation, and people get threats. I mean, I used to get death threats every day for years. So I mean, it's not a pretty game out there in the United States in politics, and I think Cornel West probably was in over his head.
Yeah, well, the fact of the matter is that he's running from a conversation, he's running from a debate, he's running from the facts. So keep running and hiding, but the fact of the matter is that we're going to be out here publishing it on our own. So we're going to be uncovering a lot more of this stuff going on. But thank you for participating. And by the way, I've brought people like wrongfully incarcerated, right? Some of the longest in state history with direct ties to Abu Jamal and key swing states like Pennsylvania. I got people in the Carolinas that's working on sustainability projects. I got people in Alaska, as you know, right? Yeah, in LA, talking about education reform. So we're going to talk about these issues where a lot of these other candidates like Cornel West and Jill Stein, and they're running away from this conversation. Joe Biden and Trump, we've documented us bringing these issues to their attention, right? Live, in emails, things like that. This has all been documented. But who's actually helping us with these issues? Thank you for being a part of this, of today's interview and future work. We're addressing disabilities issues, once again, wrongful incarcerations, public housing, and the issues of the poor that are ignored by the media. So many people are wrapped in the fight between one millionaire versus another, I was very
Right.
happy to see that you're seeing through a lot of the BS, which a lot of the public does. So
Right.
media, keep spinning your BS. You ain't getting away with nothing. Yeah, I'm very excited to meet you. I love your answers today. Yeah,
Much
thank you so
appreciated.
much.
It's a dark day in our nation when high-level authorities will seek to use every method to silence dissent. The truth must be told.
And if you want the truth, you need to check out independent media producers just like myself, DJ L7. You should subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications when I release a new video.
The truth of these
We are
words
on all
is
the major
beyond
platforms.
doubt.
That includes Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course YouTube. Unfortunately, we have definitely seen that these mainstream outlets will cave to corporate interests, so we encourage you to join our independently moderated communities of Reddit and Discord. We also encourage you to subscribe to us on BitChute and Daily Motion so you can see the content that YouTube doesn't want us to let you see. Hey, now it's time for the most important part of the video. That's right. It's time for us to tell you about the Taking Action Group. Do you need an activist? Or maybe there's no activists around willing to help you with your cause and you need to learn to become an activist. That's exactly why we're here. Every week we get up with people from across the nation, in fact even sometimes internationally, and we develop strategies and a game plan to address the issues that are affecting all of us. Every week myself from New York City and of course my co-host Lisa from Los Angeles provide a coast-to-coast perspective on what's going on in the country. If you want to donate to help out with expenses, travel, equipment, stuff like that, then I definitely appreciate it, and you can hit us off at Venmo or PayPal. Thanks a lot. Hey, by the way, we also have a merch store, so check it out. Oh my goodness, it seems like you've reached the end of the video, so make sure you check out some of our other videos, make sure you subscribe. This is your last chance to do so thanks a lot, and looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please comment below if you have any questions or issues you'd like me to address. And if you're an activist, the time to make things happen is now.